Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everybody? How you doing? All right, come on, guys. Seriously, how's it going? All right. Well, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this incredible day. I love this conference every year because it's a wonderful thing to see that the Waterfront Alliance brings together so many different entities into one space to expand and explore solutions and increase commerce. I think it's so wonderful. I am a person who primarily is concerned about climate crisis. That's really the thing that I focus on. And I know that makes perfect sense, me being a stand-up comedian, because that's what we all do in our spare times. We tell jokes and then we immediately go out and work on the climate issue. But what's really cool is when I'm here, I get to see the promise of the future as we find solutions. And I think what people don't understand is that this is an issue that is not only a problem, it is also an opportunity. And that's what makes it so terrific. Because when we talk about solving the climate crisis, what we're really talking about is creating the economy of the future. And, well, thank you. I got an applause for that. I wasn't even trying. I love you. Look you come to every one of my shows from now on. I love you. But it really is exciting. You know, I was upstairs in a session. They were talking about blue highways. And I was looking and listening and looking at, honestly, the money. That's what I was looking at. I was like, wow, there is like found money here. There are people who are going to be working, and there are going to be companies that can come into this space that are not, and at the same time, we're reducing congestion and helping the environment while creating commerce. And that kind of is what we do here, even though it may seem like sometimes there could be conflict between the desires of one group and another. But what I'm saying is, what we always can find here is common ground that will allow us all to move to higher ground. Probably not the best metaphor to use when you're talking about climate, now that I think about it. But I think that's what makes this day so fantastic. So, you know, what we're going to do to close out today is we are going to have a town hall. Now, I don't know why, because things are going so well in this country right now. I am sure that you'd be hard-pressed to come up with any concerns or issues, quite frankly. But yeah, it's been an interesting year, and I'm sure that many of you might have questions for the board who will be here, along with Joseph Sakoe. And the board members, you can ask questions. We have microphones here and a microphone here. You just come down. I want you guys to feel as relaxed as possible. And if you have a comment, which I'm sure nobody in this room has any comments, if you have a comment, that will work as well. And perhaps we can spark a conversation based on your thoughts and musings. So is that cool with you guys? How you feeling? Come on. Let me hear you. And I'm just going to close out, my little introduction of Joseph, who'll come right up and bring the board up. But I just want to say that one of the cool things, I was just listening to the last session that was here on this stage, and somebody said education as one of the chief means of bringing about not awareness but action on the environment. And you know, how when you take kids out and you show them this is where you get your water and this is what happens after you flush the toilet. And I thought that was really cool because, quite frankly, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Climate in the American Mind, which is George Mason and Yale University. They put out this, this study every single year. And fully 56 or 57, I forget, % of people say that they rarely or never talk about climate. That's insane. And I mean, that's just insane. It's right, the existential crisis that is facing us all, but nobody talks about it. And, you know, I was like, that's where we are in America right now. 3 things people just they don't talk about. You know, there's actually 4, but it's religion, politics, and climate. You know, the 4th is porn because, you know, it's a $1 billion industry that nobody watches. Anyway. Thank you for laughing at that, because I know, you know, this crowd can be a little tight sometimes. I was like, Chuck, you're taking a real chance here with the porn joke, but you know, you guys laughed and you got in there with me, so kudos to you. But I think that one of the things that we do here that is so important is that we start conversations. And I'm hoping that we will take, you know, the spark and kernel of any conversations that we started today and continue them. And I'm sure in this room we will. But I mean outside of this room, you know, with the people who fully do not either understand, they're not educated, or they think they do not care. You know, so that's where I really would love for people to take away from this is the fact that we have an opportunity not only to have conversations here, but to have conversations out there. And it's only going to do a tremendous amount of good. So with that, how you guys feel? One last time, are we loose? Are we feeling good? Are we feeling good? And with that, I will introduce your moderator for the town hall, Joseph Sakoe. Joseph, come on up. Thank you, buddy.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, hello. Always a challenge to follow Chuck. Don't quite have the comedic presence that he does. But I do want to bring up some colleagues. I'm going to get some backup up here. So we're going to have 5 Waterfront Alliance staff, some board members come up, and we're going to be kind of at your disposal here. So if I could get the team to come up. I'll go through who everybody is in just a moment for those who don't know, though you've probably met most of these folks throughout the day. We want to invite everybody here today into a discussion with the Waterfront Alliance team. We're using this format because we're really in unprecedented times, and we want to hear what's on your mind. We'll do our best to share kind of how we're thinking about things. I'm going to be honest that we are not going to have all of the answers. If we did, we would charge a lot more for the conference admission. But we're going to reserve the right to phone a friend. There's, you know, lots of very knowledgeable people in this audience. We are not afraid to call you out and ask us to help, or ask you to help us respond to a question. But one of our goals as an organization is to really make sure that we are a resource for people who are doing important work on the waterfront. That's you guys. This is one way that we think we can do that. So ask us about things that you're worried about. Ask us about things that are unanswered from other panels and questions today. Tell us what's on your mind. We're going to do our best. I'm going to invite folks up to the microphone starting now. Please keep your questions relatively short so that we can get through as many as possible. I'm going to kind of serve as moderator / air traffic controller and help prompt the right folks to answer questions. So with that, Nate, you won.
All right, no.
Not yet.
We are now. I guess I'll ask a kind of an obvious one. I think it hangs over a lot of us as we're participating in this wonderful conference, but I think it has particular import this year. With all that's going on in the federal government, a lot of the cuts we're seeing, it's certainly having an impact on regional, local nonprofits. So it's a pretty direct question, but interested to hear from, we've got the right people here, How's that impacting the work you do on a daily basis, your ground game on a day-to-day? How are you keeping this important work moving forward?
So maybe I could start with kind of the internal, how we're doing, and then maybe for Hannah, if you want to talk about community partnerships, and maybe Tyler, our actual responses to things. Sure. Oh yes, I forgot to do that. That was at the top. That was at the top of my talking points, but then everyone was seated down below. So we have Tyler, who leads our resilience work and our policy work. We have Farhana, who leads our programs team and our climate initiatives. We have Jake, who leads our education work. Aria, who leads our communications. And then our two board members, Pippa Brashear from Scape Landscape Architecture, and Matthew Washington from Phipps Houses, their chief of staff and VP. Thank you for the reminder. So I can say the Waterfront Alliance is in a really fortunate position right now to be a very kind of fiscally strong and sound organization that has a recently released strategic plan. We have a couple federal grants, one of which a bunch of people just applied for an RFP for on Coney Island. Those federal grants are safe. And we have confirmation that those are, so we are hitting the ground running in an environment where, a lot of our community partners are really struggling. We are able to kind of be a stable force for this work. And I think we also recognize, and I think you've seen that today, that, we can be a voice to push back on the things that are really important to the missions of other organizations in this room, the work that all of the engineers and architects here are doing. And we can do that in ways like we did on the panel this morning that not every organization's positioned to do. So I think, you'll see, and I'm sure we'll get into the details of kind of how some of our programs themselves are responding. But we feel like we are in this position where we have a voice, we're stable, and there's a really strong strategic plan moving forward. So Farhana, do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of community side of that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've sort of seen in the last several months is there's been obviously a huge cut to a lot of community organizations, a lot of their funding, a lot of the resources that many local community organizations have been sort of seeing. One of the things that we can do as Waterfront Alliance is build capacity. And one thing that we can do is build capacity through connecting community organizations to each other. And so that's sort of the role that we're beginning to play a little bit more. Understanding what resources are on the ground, how can a community organization in the South Bronx, for example, be connected to a community organization in Queens. Those are some of the things that we're starting to do a little bit more of to build that connectivity. We're seeing, again, resources that should not be duplicated and that should be actually working together in order to create a stronger network of essentially movement on the ground. I think in the face of, a lot of the cuts to NOAA, to FEMA, emergency preparedness, climate preparedness, these are all things that have never been more important. And so having organizations have the tools to support their local communities in that kind of preparedness has been really critical. And so that's some of the work that we've been sort of pivoting a little bit to do.
Yeah, and I can just chime in and talk a little bit about the advocacy work that we always have done, but now is even more important. And I think one of the challenges to Nate's question about progress is that a lot of the progress, unfortunately, I feel like has been stunted, and the work has shifted towards having to respond to everything that's happening. And we've had some conversations as a staff and with the board about when all the things started happening on day one of the administration, all the executive orders and cuts, that we wanted to make statements as quickly as possible, and then more and more and more happens, and it's like, well, where do you stop, and how many statements do you make? How many headlines do you chase, and what's the most important thing? And it feels like every day there's something that's kind of changing, and so we've tried to pick out what are the most important things based on the focus and mission of our organization is, what the focus and mission of the new strategic plan is. And so, some of the things that we've really gone hard at are the cuts to the offshore wind companies and the projects that we heard about in the opening plenary that have gone on for years and years and years. And so we've been out at press conferences and making statements to try to push the states to file the lawsuit, and they did. I mean, we don't take credit for that, of course, but we're pushing in that direction. And then similarly, one of the programs that's really near and dear to me and some of the work that we do with our Rise to Resilience Coalition partners are the FEMA BRIC program, which I learned to me, I thought everybody knew what that was, but I went to a ULI panel with Joseph and asked a bunch of infrastructure people if they knew what BRIC was, and nobody knew. So I hope people here know what it is, but it's a really strong resilience funding program out of FEMA for pre-disaster resilience funding that it awarded $325 million to New York State for projects, actually primarily in New York City, that was just cut. And that was a lot of projects, that was a lot of funding for projects that supported NYCHA communities, flooding in schools, hospitals, daycares, and some of the most socially and climate vulnerable neighborhoods in the city. And so seeing that gone is really tough, and so we've been trying to make a push for the city and the state to file a lawsuit, again, on the grounds that that money was committed and that you can't just take it away. And so our advocacy, I think, has shifted a little bit from thinking into the future and what good we can do with the money to having to respond, unfortunately. And so I don't know when that is gonna turn, but that's kind of where we're at right now, and I don't know if others have anything, or have seen anything different or want to chime in.
Yeah, thank you. And Nate, thanks for asking the question. It's an important question. And, there's sort of a simple answer to it, right? The question, how do we keep the work moving forward? We keep the work moving forward. And I think that's it. We have to press forward. And, we recognize the need, and even as Tyler just talked about the BRIC program and that funding and getting cut, it doesn't end the need that people have. It doesn't end the fact that there are communities that are vulnerable and have, they need an organization like Waterfront Alliance to help them become resilient and to help them recover if they are hit. And so as we look at the work, we have to keep pushing forward. We have to invest in it. It's causing us to dance and be a little light on our toes to try to figure out how we address the core issue. But we can't forget that people's lives are being impacted, and so we have to let that drive the decisions that we make and how we really press forward. And remember, that the work that we're doing is important, and keep that in mind, right? And not be concerned or question the integrity of our work because of an external factor, even if funding is getting cut. And a good example of that is, recently, a couple weeks ago, some of you probably read that the Chinese American Planning Council, or CPC, has an inquiry probe from the federal government because they were running a Know Your Rights, workshop, and somebody recorded and sent to the federal government, and now the federal government is probing this organization. And I like their response to it. Everything that we're doing is within the bounds of the law. And we are educating people on what their rights are, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? So they stood up to the inquiry to say, we're doing the right thing. And so when you're doing the right thing and know you're doing it, it helps when you need to push back. It also helps to understand that you have to push forward, even if you need to pivot a little bit at times. But I think especially with a wonderful organization like Waterfront Alliance, where we have an incredible staff, and a board that supports that and recognizes that. And so we work hand in hand to really make sure that the needs of people are still addressed and it's keeping people safe.
All right, we'll take our next question. Is there someone below the blue light?
Hello, my name's Elise. I just want to say that it's been great to be here. I'm a waterfront scholar, and so getting the opportunity to be in this space today has been really awesome. And yeah, the interdisciplinariness of it all is really great. And that's kind of what I want to talk a little bit about. I think one of the themes I picked up on today was this need to de-silo different industries with working within water and climate. And I kind of wanted to bring up another form of siloing that I think isn't talked about as much and get your takes on it. And that is like the siloing of the so-called experts versus community. And I think that was pretty prominent in this conference, where we had, in the opening plenary, Pamela was up here, but I want to say that was one of the only community members up here on the conference today, at least the ones that I went to. And I just think it's really important because like the whole dialogue around like experts and only pushing expert opinions and seeing them as like the people that will like truly move this forward. Like that, like we all know that's not true, and that was acknowledged during some of I went to the Red Hook Resiliency one, and Joy was talking about how much the residents in Red Hook contributed to the NYCHA redesign and resiliency project. But like, how can we show that kind of sentiment in all of the work that we do, including like in the conference? So yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
I feel that's such a great question, and something we think about a lot. I think maybe Jake, if you want to start, and then Farhana, and then I can talk a little bit about Coney Island.
You actually want to start?
Okay, I'll start. I think it's a very good question, and I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much for asking. I think you're absolutely spot on. I think there's an absolute opportunity to bring in more community voices. I think there were a few panels that had some community organizations. Absolutely, we should have a more diverse perspective wherever we can. And we definitely try in other venues as well. I think, again, the idea is that the Waterfront Alliance is a organization of many different voices, and it is really critical that we start to amplify everyone's voice, but particularly those who are most, I think to Matthew's point, most impacted by the climate crisis. So again, I very much appreciate your question. I think it's also important to not to amplify and not be extractive, and that's something that we're also trying to balance as well. And that's something that I think it is a fine balance, and how do we sort of toe that line is something that we're also trying to sort of think about and be very careful of. But I think I'll just stop there and maybe pass it off to Jake. Sure.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate that question. And like as someone who works in education, I think this is one of the main reasons that we do have the Waterfront Scholars who come to this conference and are able to ask these questions. I know it's something that we and a lot of other organizations have been trying to grapple with. I'm in schools all the time, and to Farhana's point of trying to be supportive and not extractive and make sure that we're actually doing meaningful work has been something that we're really trying to work on. I think some of the education and the community work that we do outside of this conference also really accurately shows that connecting people and connecting students directly with their waterfront is really one of the main ways that we do that.
I think one of the ways that we're doing this in practice, and this is just getting off the ground now, but our upcoming project on Coney Island Creek, a resilience planning project there, I think is a really, am I on?
Doesn't sound on. Your choice.
All right. Our Coney Island Creek resilience project's a really good model for this. So, are Noah and Pamela in the room? Noah's here.
Pamela ducked out.
Okay. So the New York City Aquarium, which is the WCS, Coney Island Beautification Project in Cornell have been doing this really amazing kind of community resilience planning project over the last 12 to 18 months. I know we've all been to a bunch of the different resilience sessions that they've done, where they've brought hundreds and hundreds of community members for these day-long workshops to figure out what are the priorities in Coney Island for resilience. And that's the result of that is this body of work that Cornell students have put together on what are some of the possible ideas in this community. Waterfront Alliance now has the opportunity to come in, working with Coney Island Beautification Project, and loop the city in. So now we are kind of working through this project with kind of some of the leaders from the community under kind of Pamela's guidance. Pamela is the head of Coney Island Beautification Project sat on the stage earlier today. Under her guidance, bringing together some of the leaders that emerged in that process and having them kind of work directly with city DEP and New York City Parks around what do we actually want to see along Coney Island Creek, and how do we actually get there? What's the roadmap to actually building something? So it's taking this really cool community resilience project and then adding that pragmatism of the city having to get it done, but doing it because it's Pamela and us leading that process, it's got this really community-focused lens, and we can kind of ensure that those voices are heard throughout and part of the decision-making process. And I think that kind of work is something that we want to see in more neighborhoods. I think there was a question down here. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think we mentioned Pamela. She's not here right now, a fellow board member. But the community workshops that Pamela and Noah facilitated, I think one of the critical elements of them was really dialogue. And that's something that I've found in resilience planning over the years too, is often there's a conversation about just like listening. But one of the things that Pamela has always talked about is, in the wake of Sandy, she was interacting with all of these experts and city leaders and wanted to make sure that like everyone in her community really had that direct access. And these were workshops where students came and shared great ideas, where people were able to voice their ideas and desires, but also where she brought people who were experts, who were doing projects. DEP came, the Mayor's Office of Resilience, the FloodNet program, and as a result, there was a huge uptick in people who are applying for energy resilience grants in that neighborhood. They now have 3, 4 FloodNet sensors. That dialogue, 5, 6, okay, 6. It's higher than like a couple weeks ago. That really empowering people with the information to advocate for themselves, but also to kind of see the nuance. I think often as experts and city leaders, we are afraid of the complexity of climate change, of the change that it's going to mean in our communities. And I think creating the space for that dialogue to have those really nuanced conversations is really important. And that's something that I think all the different programs are really doing at the Waterfront Alliance. It's something that we talk, deeply about as a board. That's really important to facilitate and hope that, everyone here can carry on.
And I would just add, clearly we all love Pamela because she's amazing. And, I think the question, and thank you for that question, and thank you for being a scholar also, which is amazing. But, I think what's important for us is to not see community versus expert, but community as expert, right? And so when you think about Coney Island, if anyone related to Waterfront Alliance talks about Coney Island, Pamela's going to pop out of the bush somewhere because she runs it. And so, it's recognizing that experience is what develops expertise. And so it's one of the things that I appreciate about the work that the team does at Waterfront Alliance is not just bringing experts in, but you may have a community that doesn't have an oceanographer, and so they want to talk to an oceanographer, but they're identifying the experts within the community and bringing them out and making sure they are a part of it. And so it's not Pamela with a group of experts, it's a group of experts. And that's what's critical to the work that we do, is identifying and recognizing that voice of the community. We can't do the work without it.
Sorry, I know that we're needing to wrap up this question, but I'll just give one last little point here, and this is more of a plug for the grassroots organizations, is we do have an event coming up in July called City of Water Day. that has been around for over 18 years, and it's an opportunity for these organizations to get their communities out on the water, to educate them, to get in front of these experts, have experts come out and see what it's like, get on the water, signing, kayaking, water quality testing. They do all of that kind of stuff, and this is a dedicated day, a dedicated opportunity across the region to do that. So typically there's 60 or 70 events across New York, New Jersey, Rochester County, lots of the region. So if you're looking for opportunities to connect with these organizations, that's a great place to do that.
Real quick question, very experty and wonky. What are we all doing about permitting reform?
Well, I'll turn it.
Nate and I talk about it like.
Yeah, don't get me started. Anyone who knows me know that we could sit up here and expound about this for a long time. But this has been a really, a cause that has been a focus of Waterfront Alliance programs, as well as many of the partners for a long time. And I think there are challenges to achieving our resilience goals, to our maritime plans, as well as our restoration goals without some form of thinking differently about permitting and regulatory, whether that means actual regulatory reform or just bureaucratic change. This is one of the topics that have been really, we've been digging into. And parallel efforts too. There's an ongoing effort with City College and the Science of Resilience Institute of Jamaica Bay to look at this, that has really convened workshops of practitioners doing in-water restoration, and I should say funded by the Hudson River Foundation, bringing practitioners and regulators together. And I think there's a lot of great findings and ideas that will come out of that process, as well as a really concerted effort that really began with some analysis and workshops, but with the regulatory survey that I hope, if you have not filled out, we could probably open it up to fill out again. But Joseph, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think that, what this will look like over time. So we've put together, we did a permitting symposium a few months back, and I find we came to really similar conclusions as what the Science and Resilience Institute of Jamaica Bay did, which of course should not be a surprise to anyone. There's some very kind of fundamental things that should change. I think that where there's kind of a dividing line is that they're going to come up with these really strong reforms, but are not an advocacy organization. We are an advocacy organization. So part of what our survey that we can circulate is, and you can find on our website, I believe, part of what that is looking at is trying to get some numbers around what's the economic impact of a permitting permitting system that's slow and inconsistent. How many dollars is that costing New York taxpayers a year, because we're adding months and months and months of time onto every project? How many hurricane seasons is that costing a resilience project when the 45-day timeline isn't met? And what we want to get out of that permitting survey is kind of the ammunition, if you will, to start to go to elected officials, to go to other sources and say, this is why this matters. There's going to be all these incredible recommendations that come out of our symposium and the Jamaica Bay work, but if nobody thinks they're important, who has the decision-making power, it won't go anywhere. Our focus right now is building that data set to make it clear, hey, this matters, it's costing us money, it's costing us risk in hurricane seasons.
Can you share some of the preliminary results of the survey? Just ballpark it.
So we asked about how long it takes to go through the permitting process on average we did SBS, DEC, and Army Corps, each of which has like a 30-day to 90-day window for most projects, most project types. And this is giant asterisk about this. I'm glossing over lots of important details. Nobody record this portion. Important disclaimer there. Those 30 to 90-day windows, we asked about how long does it take you on a typical project. And we asked people to exclude like the big precedent-setting prospects, in major projects. Don't include East Side Coastal Resilience and Northwest Battery Park City, these mega projects that, of course, they're going to take longer. Do the normal projects. 30 to 90 days, we were hearing 8, 9, 10 months was the average. We asked about, on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being there's no positive environmental change as a result of the permitting process, 100 being, hey, our project is way better for the environment because of this process. The engineers, landscape architects, and architects that filled that out gave it like a 34 on average. So we're seeing like there is unrest here, and the things that we're hearing anecdotally seem to be really true across the board.
And I would say less, we're like picking on the regulatory agencies. I don't want to, because one of the key takeaways from, I think, both processes and the early on conversations was really making sure that the regulatory agencies had the capacity, both in terms of resources and staff, to keep these permits moving, to have institutional knowledge, to be able to create and document the resources that give the guidance necessary for us to understand as practitioners kind of what the permitting process is. So as we think about these federal funding conversations and things like that, the resources for the regulatory agencies to actually actualize this action is a big part of the conversation. So just want to add that.
Yeah, great addition. There's no way that recommendation number one isn't get these incredibly important and smart people some help. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. Great conference. We heard earlier this morning about the devastating cuts to NOAA, to FEMA, touched briefly on the insurance crisis. We all know that you can only get insurance for a one-year term, which is misalignment with a 30-year mortgage that people typically have. Can you tell us, as we enter our primaries here in June, I know you're a 501(c), so you can't touch on who you endorse, but where is the city now that the budget has passed? Because I understand my neighborhood here in Lower Manhattan that was devastated on the east side has no money in continuing their project.
Yeah, it's a good question. I cannot endorse. I have my thoughts, obviously, but I won't say that. So everybody should actually go and check out. So as of for the last 2 years, the city is now, and moving forward, but in the last 2 budgets, they now do a climate budget. So you can actually search New York City climate budget and see where money is being spent for climate. And it's this year is particularly abysmal. For coastal resilience, the city is investing $2.9 million. That's
Over
it.
520 miles coastal waterfront.
Yeah.
So I just wanted you to hear it from Tyler.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tyler.
It's really terrible. There's like maybe, I don't know, 40 million for stormwater and like 20 million for extreme heat, which is great, but 2.9 for coastal resilience. So we're walking into hurricane season with that. And I think 2.1 million of that is for the new Bureau of Coastal Resilience. If anybody heard Lorianne Farrell speak at my panel on floodgates, that's getting some help to her office, which is extremely important, but it leaves us with very little money to spend on anything else. And so that's not great. And then I should also, you mentioned insurance and some other things, and there's another report, not to just be like, go look up stuff, but there's another really great report that the city released that DEP, NYCHA, EDC put together called Financing Shoreline Resilience, and it was put together over the course of last year. I don't know if the city was thinking strategically about the change in administration, but the report kind of comes out with that. It's helpful with the change in administration and has some ideas for how the city can actually finance shoreline resilience without the full need for federal support. And some of the stuff is controversial, like some of the stuff is creating a shoreline protection district, like a business improvement district, where you would actually have a community behind a wall. So let's use the Lower East Side, for example, where they have the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. That community would become a shoreline protection district, and you would have to pay a user fee, and that user fee would help fund the operations and maintenance of the gates that they've just built in the Lower East Side. So that's a way to sustain the financing, but it's also a charge on the community and on businesses. But then there's also the other side of that, which is that that whole community has been taken out of the FEMA mapped floodplain as a result of the project. So there's a cost savings, and we can go on. And so there's all these ideas that the city has put forward that are interesting as a way to finance, I think, some of this. But to Catherine's point, yeah, it's not been great to see, and I think that's the hope of our mayoral forum tomorrow, is a plug that we'll try to get the candidates who are running for mayor to commit to waterfronts and resilience and public access, because we don't hear that enough. So thanks for the question.
Hi, I'm Judy Weiss. I come from academia, and I'm reacting to your loss of a grant, federal grant that was mentioned earlier. You didn't lose a federal grant?
No.
We didn't.
Ours are stable.
With-
We were very,
with the safe.
All right,
we were
let-
concerned, but we were.
Advice for future. Academics have figured this out, that it's a word. The Doge or whoever, look for a particular word. And if you change the word, they're not going to read the grant. They're reading the title and the abstract. So don't use the word climate in the title or the abstract. And you're much more likely to not get it pulled if you've had one that was pulled, or to get funded. Just keep DEI out of the title and the abstract. Keep climate out, and they won't notice the bulk. They don't read the bulk of the grant. That's all.
I will. I will say before we go to the next question that Wedge uses federally banned words 288 times. It's a lot. That's a lot to remove. I think we could, Wedge works a lot with our friends in Miami. There's a Southeast Florida Climate Compact that is essentially the 4 county governments around Miami and Fort Lauderdale have gotten together to do climate planning together, and are really incredible at like sneaking things past Tallahassee, who has they've had this same, they can't say climate change, they can say hurricane resistance. So they're kind of a model that I think we and others should be looking at that have done that really well.
This town hall has become a workshop.
I think this is our last question.
Oh, that's fantastic. Hi, my name is David DiGregorio. I work in Tenafly, which has been in the news lately. Tenafly Public Schools. I'm an administrator there, but I'm not there for the school. I'm here with a colleague, Matt, over here, with the Coalition to Save the SS United States. How many people here, if I can see a show of hands, are familiar with that ship? It was built at the height of American ingenuity and engineering and launched in 1950, taken out of service in 1969. Went through several different hands, most recently purchased by Okaloosa County, 75% Trumpers in Okaloosa County, nothing wrong with that. However, they're going to plan to sink the SS United States in the so-called Gulf of America. The SS United States is a work of art. It belongs at her home port in New York City. Talk about waterfront and talk about having a pearl, a diamond representing that waterfront, a work of art and beauty could be in Brooklyn, in Red Hook. So if any of you would like to comment on that, they are at this point looking to take the funnels, remove the funnels. We have a lawsuit registered with the Okaloosa County Commissioners, and we hope that there'll be some intervention by the executive branch. If anyone knows Donald Trump, have him sign it.
We understand the question and kind of where you're
it.
going. I think there's a great model with, is it the John Harvey, the fireboat? As folks who've restored things successfully. I think that, we look at like the Pete Davidson Ferry and how hard it is to find that kind of docking space in New York. Like it's a real challenge. It's not something we've looked into, but
We have a dock ready to go. It's also it's about 990 foot, 990 feet. Yes, 990 is a 1,000-foot dock. But
I
if
think
anyone can intervene and help to save that ship, it would be a credit to New York. Something
I would say so. We're at time. This is going to be a segue that works for you. So the next step of this conference, we're all going upstairs to the reception at the end of the day. If you are interested in saving this ship, find him at the reception. This is the group that can figure out if this works. Find him at the reception. You want to jump in, Matthew?
I would just offer, if anyone independently wants to do that, but it's not a project of Waterfront Alliance, but we know that the SS United States has been around. I thought it was in Philadelphia. It's been floating around somewhere, but it's all the best to you, David. Yeah.
We need one billionaire.
Well.
So do we.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. With that, with our need for 1 billionaire or more, I want to. Did you want to jump in? I want to thank all of you for participating in this town hall. This was a kind of fun experiment for us, and we wanted to be able to answer questions, and I hope that we were able to do that for folks. The reception is going to be upstairs, overlooking the South Battery Park City construction site, wedge verified. Thank you all so much for being here at our record-breaking 18th annual conference.